Is there a pyramid on Mars? Mysterious three-sided pyramid on Mars sparked debate about ancient life. A strange pyramid-like formation spotted on Mars has once again ignited debate across the internet, raising questions about whether the red planet may have once hosted an advanced civilization. Now let's dive deeper and explore every layer on this story on our AI podcast.
Usually, when we look out the natural world, we expect chaos. You look at a mountain range, a deep canyon, or a jagged coastline, and the geometry is completely random.
Right. There's this beautiful, unpredictable messiness to geology. Nature rarely draws with a ruler.
Exactly. But then you are scanning through satellite imagery of a barren alien landscape, and sitting right there in the middle of all that chaotic rubble is a shape with perfectly straight lines.
A massive symmetrical triangle.
Yeah, it looks completely out of place. So welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. We know you are someone who loves to cut through the noise and get straight to the aha moments, and today our mission is to unpack that exact anomaly.
The viral three-sided pyramid discovered on Mars.
That's the one. We are going to separate the hard planetary science from the intense internet speculation, dive into the declassified government documents surrounding it, and figure out what this bizarre structure actually reveals about the red planet and our own human psychology. Okay, let's unpack this.
To really grasp the magnitude of this anomaly, we have to look past the sensational headlines about aliens and start with the raw data.
Right.
We need to connect the dots between the extreme, violent geology of Mars and the highly specific way human beings process visual information.
And before we can really debate what this structure is, we logically have to establish where it is and how we found it. Because the location of this structure, this region called Candor Chasma, inside Valles Marineris, isn't just some quiet desert plain.
Oh, not at all. It is one of the most violent geological scars in the entire solar system.
It really is.
It is staggering in scale. To give you a perspective on Valles Marineris, if you dropped this canyon system onto Earth, it would stretch horizontally across the entire United States, from New York all the way to California.
Wait, really? The whole country?
The whole country. And it dips down as deep as 7 miles in some places. You are looking at an environment defined by tectonic rifting, colossal historical floods, and incredibly steep cliffs.
Where billions of years of layered rock have been exposed, right?
Exactly. It's a landscape shaped by massive gravitational collapses and continent-sized landslides. It is the perfect recipe for extreme and unusual geological formations.
It's a place where the geology is already turned up to an 11. And it was inside this chaotic, dramatic region that the initial discovery was made back in 2001.
By Keith Laney, using the Mars Global Surveyor.
Hi. So Laney is poring over these orbital photographs, and sitting in the western region of Candor Chasma is this formation. It has 3 distinct sides. It has striking symmetrical geometry, and in the imagery, the edges are razor sharp.
Which is why the image exploded in popularity. I mean, when you were looking at an endless sea of fractured sediment and random craters, a rigid geometric structure acts like a visual magnet.
It totally does, and filmmaker Brian Dobbs resurfaced this footage later, pointing out that the scale of the structure is roughly comparable to the Great Pyramid of Giza here on Earth.
Yeah, and Laney argued that if a formation with these exact dimensions and sharp lines were found sitting out in an earthly desert, it would trigger an immediate massive archaeological excavation.
Which makes perfect sense when you think about how we perceive our environment. Like, imagine looking out at your own backyard for a second. It's dirt, grass, some overgrown bushes, mostly organic shapes.
Right.
If there was a perfectly cubed rock just sitting in the middle of your lawn, you wouldn't just glance past it.
No, it immediately commands your attention.
Because it feels engineered, it feels entirely out of place in a natural setting. But, here's what usually happens with these space mysteries. We get a blurry, low-resolution photo in 2001. Everyone panics and says it's an alien monument. And then a decade later, we send a better camera, and it turns out to be a weird smudge on the lens or a pile of formless dirt.
The classic debunking.
Right. But I was looking at the data from the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, which arrived a few years later in 2006, and it completely breaks that usual pattern. Did sharper images debunk it? No. The sharper the camera got, the more distinct this pyramid actually became.
What's fascinating here is that the technological upgrade actually deepened the mystery instead of erasing it. The Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter carries this instrument called the HiRISE camera.
The high-resolution imaging science experiment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It acts like a high-powered telescope in orbit, and it's capable of resolving objects on the Martian surface down to the size of a kitchen table.
That's incredible.
It is. So when the high-rise camera captured new, sharper images of Candor Chasma from 2007 onward, the fuzzy pixels from 2001 didn't just dissolve into a normal messy rock. The high-resolution data confirmed the three distinct faces and the sharp converging edges.
And it wasn't just sharper. I mean, it survived a massive stress test of lighting conditions. Usually, an optical illusion on a mountain or a crater depends entirely on the sun hitting it at one incredibly specific, perfect angle.
Yeah, the face on Mars is a great example of that.
Exactly. The moment the sun moves across the sky, the shadow shifts, and the illusion of a face or a pyramid just vanishes. The magic is gone. But we have photographs of this Candor Chasma structure spanning from 2001 all the way to 2016.
That's 15 years of orbital passes.
15 years. Captured during different Martian seasons with the sun high, low, and coming from entirely different directions. So how does a trick of the light survive that?
It doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that structural consistency across all those diverse lighting conditions tells us something definitive. It proves that this is a uniquely stubborn visual anomaly because it is a physical, three-dimensional landform.
Okay.
It isn't a shadow play, a trick of a low-resolution lens, or a glitch in the sensor data. The geometry physically exists in the Martian dirt. You have a massive, three-sided, pyramid-like mountain of rock sitting on the floor of the canyon.
Okay, so since the structure physically exists and it stubbornly retains its geometric shape no matter how you photograph it, that forces the conversation to pivot entirely. We aren't asking, does this thing exist anymore?
Right, the debate shifts to who or what actually made it.
Exactly. Which fractures the conversation into two distinct camps. You've got the artificial geometry theory versus the natural geological explanation.
Let's examine the artificial theory first, which was championed by researchers like Keith Laney and George Haas. They look at this object's symmetry and propose it could be artificial.
Like remnants of a deeply ancient civilization that once inhabited the Red Planet.
Right. And to be clear, our goal here isn't to validate or debunk their specific claims right out of the gate, but to impartially unpack what their source material argues.
Of course. We're just looking at what they presented.
Haas sums up their viewpoint with a very provocative quote. He states, "You don't have to be a geologist to know the difference between a rock and a sculpture."
Oh, wow. It's an incredibly sticky quote because it targets our intuitive sense of design. We know what intentionality looks like, but we do have to bring the geologists into the room here.
We do.
Because planetary scientists argue that nature is, in fact, an incredibly capable sculptor. But I have to push back on the mechanics of that just a bit. I understand that Valles Marineris is a canyon shaped by erosion. But wind is chaotic. Water is chaotic. Landslides are incredibly messy.
Oh, absolutely.
So, if Valles Marineris is full of chaotic landslides, isn't it statistically wild to get something this symmetrical by pure chance? How does a random, chaotic force like blowing sand perfectly machine a rock into three symmetrical sides with sharp, converging ridges?
By using a geological mechanism that creates something called a ventifact.
A ventifact.
Yeah. Think of the Martian wind as a planetary-scale power sander. Mars is a dry, dusty world with powerful, sustained winds. And over millions of years, these winds pick up abrasive sand and dust particles, effectively sandblasting any exposed rock.
Okay, that makes sense.
So if you have a prevailing wind that blows consistently from one specific direction for a million years, it grinds the rock face perfectly flat.
But the rock has three sides.
Right, and planetary climates aren't static. When the axial tilt of Mars shifts, or the climate changes over epochs, the dominant wind direction changes. Now the power sander is hitting the rock from a second angle, grinding a second flat plane.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah. If the wind direction shifts rhythmically between three dominant angles over millions of years, nature will quite literally machine a piece of layered sediment into a perfect, sharp-edged, three-sided pyramid.
So it's not a single chaotic gust of wind. It is a slow, methodical grinding from very specific atmospheric patterns.
Exactly. That explains the physical shaping of the rock. But there's another mechanism at work here, and it has absolutely nothing to do with the Martian atmosphere.
It's happening entirely inside our own heads.
Yes. This brings us to pareidolia.
Right, because we know the human brain is fundamentally a pattern recognition engine. From an evolutionary biology standpoint, spotting patterns quickly is a survival mechanism.
That kept us alive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you are a primitive human and you see a vague shape in the bushes, your brain aggressively forces that visual data into a recognizable pattern. A false positive, like seeing a perfect face in the clouds or seeing a tiger when it's really just shifting shadows, costs you nothing but a spike in adrenaline. But failing to see the tiger costs you your life. So we are running this ancient survival software that is desperate to find faces, structures, and meaning in chaotic noise.
And exactly the same software is running when we look at satellite imagery. When we look at a deeply eroded ventifact on the floor of a Martian canyon, our brains immediately impose the rigid concept of earthly architecture onto it.
We fill in the missing data.
Yes, we sharpen the edges in our own perception. George Hawes argues that you know the difference between a rock and a sculpture, but the biological reality of pareidolia proves that our brains will ruthlessly force a natural rock into a sculpture if it helps us categorize what we're looking at.
We basically auto-correct the Martian geology into something comfortable and familiar.
That's a great way to put it.
But here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because that deep psychological desire to find a lost civilization out there in the dust, to find earthly architecture on an alien world, it doesn't just live on internet message boards or in fringe theories.
Oh, it doesn't.
This exact concept actually reached the highest, most highly funded levels of the United States intelligence community.
Yeah, the declassified documents from the CIA's Project Stargate take this entire narrative into incredibly strange territory.
Very strange. And again, we're just reporting impartially on what the source documents claim here.
Right. Project Stargate was a government initiative exploring the potential of remote viewing. They were testing if human subjects could use anomalous cognition, essentially psychic abilities, to observe distant or hidden targets.
And the methodology they used in these sessions is fascinating because they were trying to apply scientific controls to something inherently unscientific.
Yeah.
In one specific declassified transcript from 1984, they brought in a remote viewing subject named Joe McMoneagle. Now, the interviewer didn't tell McMoneagle he was looking at Mars. They just gave him a sealed envelope with a set of precise planetary coordinates and a time frame stretching back roughly 1 million years.
And they just asked him to focus on those coordinates and describe what he saw.
Exactly.
The claims McMoneagle made during that blind session are staggering in their specificity. He didn't just describe a barren, rocky landscape. He claimed to mentally perceive massive megalithic pyramids.
Pyramids?
Yes. He described going inside them, detailing enormous cavernous interior spaces, intersecting rooms, and even a network of heavy, smooth roads connecting various structures across the surface.
He also described seeing the remnants of a tall, thin, ancient people sheltering inside these pyramids to survive some sort of environmental cataclysm.
Right.
It is wild to consider that federal defense funds were being utilized for psychic space exploration. It reads exactly like a science fiction novel. But, you know, as someone focused on synthesizing hard data, how do we process a deeply bizarre historical footnote like this against the actual physical science of the geological event we just discussed?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the Stargate transcripts don't actually give us a map of ancient Mars. They give us a high-definition map of the human subconscious.
Oh, I like that.
The fact that the CIA was funding this proves how universally intoxicating the idea of an ancient, inhabited Mars truly is. It shows that the desperation to find something recognizable, to know that we aren't completely alone in the universe, transcends amateur internet sleuths.
It reached all the way up to Cold War intelligence agencies trying to leverage the human mind to conjure up alien cities.
Exactly.
It's almost a testament to human loneliness. We want cosmic companies so badly that our minds will construct roads and pyramids out of literal static, whether that static is a blurry satellite photo or the mental void of a remote viewing session.
That is the crucial reality check here. The documents are absolutely real. The experiments genuinely took place in the 1980s. But the results they produce are not science.
Right.
Remote viewing is widely classified by the scientific community as pseudoscience. The transcripts of Joe McMoneagle touring the interior of Martian pyramids provide absolutely zero scientifically validated evidence about the physical reality of the planet.
We have to compartmentalize it.
Yes, it is a wildly entertaining piece of Cold War history, but we cannot allow the thrill of a CIA paranormal experiment to blur the lines of our factual geological understanding of Valles Marineris.
Absolutely. So as we pull all of these disparate threads together, the canyon geology, the 15 years of high-resolution satellite photography, the evolutionary quirks of the human brain, and the CIA's psychic espionage, what is the final verdict for you listening right now?
Well, first, the three-sided pyramid is a very real, physically existing, and visually spectacular geological formation. It's not a glitch, and it's not a trick of the light.
Right. Second, despite the viral internet debates, the compelling quotes about rock versus sculpture, and the deeply strange tangents into remote viewing, there is zero direct scientific proof that this is an artificial structure.
There's no hard evidence it was engineered by an ancient civilization.
And finally, the most robust, widely accepted scientific truth is that this is a natural product of millions of years of Martian geological processes. You have shifting directional winds carving a vent effect out of layered rock, combined with a textbook example of our own brain's pareidolia. So what does this all mean?
Yeah, where does that leave us?
To me, it means that even if this structure is just a pile of heavily sandblasted rock, it is a beautiful reminder of how much of Mars remains unexplored. It highlights just how desperately and eagerly we are searching for meaning in the stars.
And this raises an important question, one that builds on everything we've unpacked today, and it's something for you to mull over. We've established that the human brain is fundamentally hardwired with this evolutionary survival software.
Right.
Pareidolia forces us to see pyramids, faces, and lost cities in the chaotic dirt of another planet. But as we move into the next era of space exploration, we are increasingly relying on artificial intelligence to scan, map, and analyze the surfaces of these alien worlds for us.
We're offloading the observation to machines.
Exactly. So what happens then? Will an AI, which is theoretically free from our biological quirks and survival instincts, look at that exact same image and see the Martian landscape for what it truly is, just wind and rock? Or because human beings are the ones writing the code, programming the algorithms, and training these neural networks on our own flawed visual data, will our machines eventually inherit our pareidolia?
Oh, wow.
Will our artificial intelligence start discovering lost civilizations and phantom pyramids in the shadows exactly the same way we do?
Okay, one question for you. Could the mysterious three-sided pyramid spotted in NASA's Mars image actually be evidence of an ancient alien civilization, or is it simply a natural rock formation that appears artificial due to lightning angles and human pattern recognition? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.